Paul. I appreciate it. Paul, I'm gonna call you out. You didn't write that.
No, I did not.
I know you didn't write that because I wrote that.
And I'm glad it was brief. I got to be honest.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah.
The reason I'm claiming credit for it is because that's your first introduction to AI today. I wrote that with the help of a generative AI tool. Paul took all my flavor text. I don't have anything to say about myself anymore. I appreciate you guys having me out. I am, I think, relatively unstructured. Some people might say unprepared. I like to say unstructured. We're going to talk about whatever you guys want to talk about until they shuffle us out of here. That's basically how this works. I appreciate you guys allowing me to come out and visit with you. At Oak Ridge National Laboratory, we've got three pillars that we think have to happen simultaneously for the lab to be successful. The first is research. We are the world's premier research laboratory. We are an entirely peacetime mission, so a lot of people know Oak Ridge National Laboratory from the World War II era. We helped end the Second World War. Since then, our mission has turned almost entirely peacetime. We do significant work in the national security space, but we don't do weapons. We let our friends at Y12 handle that. What we do is basic and applied scientific research in almost every field of human endeavor. We are really unique in that we have some of the world's only or some of the world's biggest. So we usually have the world's fastest computer. Sadly today, we have the world's second fastest computer. Thank you. We have to let our friends at the other national laboratories have a shot at the number one spot every once in a while. It's only the fair thing to do. So ORNL is the home of Frontier. It, for the longest time, was the world's fastest computer for a long time, for a year, which is a long time in supercomputers. It continues to be the world's greenest computer. It is the world's most power efficient computer in terms of power consumption per computing capability. In addition to supercomputing, we do a lot of work with nuclear materials. This is a fun fact. We've cured prostate cancer more or less. The problem is that the medicine that it takes to do that is called actinium-227. It's based on a radioisotope called actinium-227. And one of the only places you can make that is in the reactor at Oak Ridge National Laboratory. And so we have got to really ramp up our manufacturing to be able to create enough of that to have a meaningful impact on human health. We do a lot of health research. One of the things we did with supercomputing was work on the COVID vaccine. But we also do things like of course, we're a Department of Energy facility, and so a lot of our research is in energy. I think the coolest thing we do in that regard is we have made jet fuel out of grass. So instead of having to pull it out of the ground in terms of oil and refine it, we'll go mow the medians in the freeway and take all those gas clippings and drop them in a bioreactor and turn it into jet fuel. So it's a sustainable source. It is not particularly carbon friendly because it is still jet fuel. It is the exact same chemical thing, but it is renewable, which is a really nice thing about it. We also do a lot of work in terms of exploration. So all the pictures you see from Mars, the NASA rovers and little drones that fly around the planet and all that, they're typically powered by plutonium that comes from Oak Ridge National Laboratory. So Oak Ridge National Laboratory, DOE has 25 core capabilities when it comes to research, and we do 25 of them. So the reason that Oak Ridge lets me come out and spend time with you guys is, like I said, we've got three pillars. The first one being research, the second one being operations, and that's what I think many of you are interested in, is how to operate your organizations, human resources, finance, all of the business operations that go into sustaining the organization to do whatever it is that you do, to educate, to fuel, to support, to finance. So whatever it is that your organization does, operations is what makes that possible, and that's another pillar of success at ORNL. The third is community engagement. So equally important to research, equally important to operations is community engagement. Oak Ridge is a part of the community. Oak Ridge National Laboratory does not exist without the community. We live here. We send our kids to school here. We get our utilities from the community. We get our talent from the community. So much of what we do is inextricably intertwined with the community. It is really important that we are out with you, engaging. We get so much from the community, it's important for us to be able to invest back into you. So, thank you for letting me come. I promise, I'm not allowed to sip my coffee there, so I'm going to borrow y'all's table. I know what Paul asked me to come talk about. The bad news for Paul is that it's too late for them to rescind that invitation. So, we can talk about whatever y'all want to talk about. I've got like 6 or 7 slides, so I've got almost no content. I'm going to make it all up as we go. So that means that we can talk about literally whatever y'all want to talk about. What are some of the things that you'd like to learn today?
Just real ways that, like in HR, that we can use AI productively, I guess.
Okay. Oh, wait. What's going on here? Pardon me. Just because I'm an IT executive doesn't mean that I can work a computer. So this is my tagline for today. AI is not coming for your job. People who know how to use AI are coming for your job. So we'll talk about how you can use AI both in your job, perhaps as an HR professional, or as an HR professional thinking about how can the folks in my organization use AI to do their jobs. So we will absolutely talk about that. What else?
Jay, I'm curious if you guys are using agents
Mm-hmm.
at ORNL. I think that's the next phase of evolution, at least in terms of the business market.
Okay. So what Stefan's talking about, he used the word agents, and I know that I'm getting old because I refuse to acknowledge new words. I've recently learned the word agentic, and I refuse to acknowledge it as a word. But it is a way of using artificial intelligence. The idea is you come up with these little, we'll call them robots. They're not physical devices, but think of them as robots, and you give each of these little robots a part of a task. And so one of the things we've learned with humans is that working in teams often results in better results. Same thing with AI. If we break a problem up into smaller parts, we dole it out to agents to deal with their little part of the problem. And then one of the things we can do, we can make one agent's job checking the work of another agent. And so it creates a feedback loop that has turned out to be a pretty useful way to use AI. That's about as deep as I'll go into agents, but we will talk about that a little bit. What else? It's this side of the room's turn.
What does AI mean for HR in general, and how do we make the best use of it? I know that we can use it to write better letters, but how do we do that in day-to-day HR writing?
Okay, so you want to talk about some use cases, or you want to talk about how to actually execute on those use
I
cases?
understand it too. I mean,
Okay.
I'm in the above 50 range now, so I'm with you in new words.
Right.
I'm here to learn new words.
So the wonderful thing about all of you thinking, I am too old for this, I do not understand this, is that nobody understands it. In fact, one of the really interesting problems that I personally am having, I have got a lot of education. And in that education, I have learned a lot about information literacy. My doctorate, by the way, is not what you expect it to be in. I don't think it's not in IT, it's not in computer science, it's in education. And it turned out I was made for this moment. I have undergraduate degrees in computer science, a master's degree in information science, and then I'm covering up the mic, aren't I? Sorry, Mitchell. And then my doctorate in education. So I learned about human cognition and learning, and it turned out that is what artificial intelligence is the combination of computers and simulations of human learning. So AI literacy is a new thing. Anybody that tells you that they really understand how to use AI is probably living in a tent of their own ignorance. It's hard to know what you don't know, and none of us know anything. This is a revolution equal to the personal computer, equal to the World Wide Web. So the good news for those of us who are old and don't like new words is that none of these people know anything more than we do. We're all learning this together at the same time. The other good thing is that for those of us who are older and more experienced, our professional judgment that has been honed through really hard lessons over time is going to be critical in making good choices about how to adopt these tools and how to adapt to them. So, if you're young and excited, and I'm looking at Patrick and Elena back there, you guys are thinking about all the possibilities, and you got all the energy, and you got all the initiative, and that is awesome. We need that. If you're towards the end of your career and you've seen everything and you're grizzled, we desperately need that. There's something here for everyone. So we talked about how we can use AI in HR, a couple of different perspectives on that. We've talked about agents, so sort of mechanically, how can we do it? Anything else? Joy?
In terms of like security and confidentiality when using AI, what do we need to look for? Do we just rely on our companies to provide these firewalls?
You want to hear scary stories, don't you? I'll tell you some scary stories. All right, we'll do that. That's not your last chance to tell me what you want. We'll let you adjust this as we go. I thought maybe we would start with just some very baseline information. So what is artificial intelligence? And again, because this is new, nobody knows what they're talking about, including me, but here's the operating definition I've come up with, which is AI is the computer simulation of human cognitive capabilities. A lot of jargon baked into that. But the idea is humans have different things that they can do with their brain. Processing language is an example. I speak, you hear, somehow an idea that is internal to me becomes internal to you. Communication is a kind of magic. We use air pressure to make imaginary things travel from one person to another. That language processing is a human cognition. And so you've seen that. That's been around for a while. You type in a question in Google and it gives you something approximating an answer. That's an example of language processing. Vision is another thing that you do. So hearing and auditory language is about air pressure. Vision is about the electromagnetic detectors that are stapled to your skull. Regular people call them eyes. And so being able to understand electromagnetic radiation, understand patterns in it, and assign meaning to those patterns. So when we talk about computer vision, we're talking about anything from license plate readers to OCR. So if you guys have physical forms and you've got a system where you can scan that physical form in and it can make the text on that copy and pasteable, that was a form of computer vision. It saw a picture of the letter on the piece of paper, and it recognized it as the letter T. And so then it made it a digital version of the letter T that you could manipulate like anything else. So computer vision. Pattern recognition. So when we talk about AI today, almost everybody is thinking about what we term generative AI. There are layers. I don't know if I have a picture for it, but one of the earlier forms of artificial intelligence was machine learning. And by the way, all of this is just math. Artificial intelligence has no soul. Artificial intelligence has no awareness. Artificial intelligence is a really, really fancy calculator. It is all boiling down to statistics. And so that is what a lot of pattern recognition is based upon. So before the AI craze statisticians had come up with quantitative ways to identify groupings. So for instance, you might take a job description from a manager who wants to create a new position, and you might want to, and say you're, I don't know, Pilot, you're some huge corporation, and you get tons of these job descriptions, more than you can devote a human being to looking at and classifying as exempt or non-exempt, or to a particular job category or a particular pay scale. And so you could use the combination of vision, language processing, and pattern recognition to get a computer to tell you, I think this job description probably fits best in this category. And then learning. Learning is the idea of taking in new information and changing the manner in which you respond to stimuli after having taken in that new information. So one of the kinds of artificial intelligence is machine learning, and it's the idea that I can take in information, I can build a model. And when we say build a model, you just grabbed your coffee cup and drank from it. How did you know that was going to work?
Previous experience.
Yes. So you've got a model in your head of how a coffee cup works, of how a coffee cup probably ought to look. It probably should be round. I mean, I guess it could be, different shapes, but if you've ever tried to drink out of a square coffee cup, you probably got some coffee on your shirt and you know that that's a bad shape. So you've got a model in your head of what a coffee cup probably ought to look like. And you've got a model in your head of the processes that go along with a coffee cup. I'm going to grab it with my hands, probably one hand, because if I grab it with two hands, I'm going to look like a squirrel and people are going to make fun of me. And you're going to bring it up to your lips. You're going to tilt it, because part of your model is fluid dynamics. And you know that a liquid like coffee is going to maintain its own level, and you take advantage of that by tilting the cup, letting it maintain its own level and creep up towards the edge so that you can get the coffee out of the cup. So you've got a model in your head of a coffee cup. We can create models in computers, and one of the things that we can then do is we can continually adjust the model as new information comes in. That is machine learning. So this is what artificial intelligence is in a nutshell. Questions about that so far, or observations? By the way, when I ask questions, just if anything pops in your head and you just want to spit it out, it doesn't matter if it's a question or not.
So AI doesn't have awareness.
No, it does not.
And so what we're seeing in different things throughout the world, like different examples of like robotic people that are resembling humans, having what appear to be thoughts and emotions, just means we're not as complex as we think we are in our thought process.
Yes, that's not fair, because now you're trying to make me think less of myself. So humans are incredibly deep, incredibly complex things, but there is no incredibly deep or incredibly complex thing that you cannot create a simplified model of. And so the reason that when you're interacting with ChatGPT or you're interacting with a humanoid robot and it feels like you're interacting with a person is because a clever scientist or engineer somewhere has created a model of a human and knows what kind of stimuli will produce a desired kind of response. So I want you to feel a certain way. I want you to feel included. And so one of the things that I do is I walk up to you, because the physical presence, the physical distance, I know is one of the things that interacts. I make eye contact with you, because I know that one of the things you're doing is you're watching my eyes and you're looking where I am and you're keenly focused on where my point of focus is. And so I know these things about humans and I know about how they'll react. And so consequently, we can take that model or aspects of it and we can have a computer perform actions that will draw out a particular response. So, you know what? We're on the second slide and it's already too much PowerPoint. So, let's do this. Oh, you're not seeing what I'm seeing. In slideshow. Yay. Let's see. Nope. Nope. If there is anyone who can help me get my web browser up on a screen, that would be amazing. Oh, don't take a picture of my status report, good God. This is not part of the presentation. Yes. Good Lord.
That's how they keep it secure.
Did I do it? All right. Look at that. This is ChatGPT. So there are a number of generative AI tools. What generative AI means is it is an artificial intelligence tool that generates content. That's where the generative comes from. So it is going to create content where content did not exist before. It's going to create content that never existed before. Brand new sentences, brand new words. The way it's going to do it is going to predict what the best thing is that should follow. And it's going to do that again and again. It's going to do it really, really well. So tell me a joke is the prompt that I've entered. And this is called a prompt. So with generative AI tools, they generally are in a sort of call and response form. So if you went to a certain kind of church growing up, you know call and response. This is prompt and response. So I'm going to give it a prompt. I can phrase it as a sentence, as an imperative, as a question, and it'll give me a response. So I told it, tell me a joke. Why did the Scarecrow win an award? Because he was outstanding in his field. Now actually, that may or may not be a brand new sentence. I feel like it probably stole that joke from somewhere. So the way that these generative models are trained, this is from a company called OpenAI. OpenAI has a bunch of different models. And so I've used the term model before, and in this case what model means is a particular large language model. And so it is a model of human language and human language interaction. And it is trained by taking something like 70 billion pieces of information related to human language and calculating relationships among those 70 billion pieces of information. So many of these models were trained basically by text from the internet. So they'd go to Reddit or they'd go to CNN.com or whatever. They'd scoop in as much human text as they possibly could and analyze the relationships among the words. And so it's predicting what should come next. So if the prompt is tell me a joke, it's seen the word joke gazillion times throughout its training material. And it has seen the kinds of responses. And it has seen probably this very response before. And through endless repetition, this is the machine learning, part of the training was not only taking in this whole corpus of text, but also getting feedback on the responses. So you'll notice that, you'll notice they may not have it in this one. Yeah, so this particular one doesn't have a feedback mechanism, but many of these, they'll have a thumbs up or a thumbs down tool. And so there was for a long time humans that were rating the response. And so it would say, that's a bad joke, or that's an off-color joke, or that's an illegal joke, or that's hilarious, or that's really appropriate in a professional setting. Whatever, it's giving it feedback. And so now by this point, when I ask it, tell me a joke, this is what it comes up with.
So I have a question in
Yes.
relation to that if I can. So there was a question earlier about security and things like that. I've used ChatGPT and kind of playing around with it, and it will build on conversations that I've had with it in the past, right?
Yeah.
And so it knows that I work in a private little arts nonprofit, even though I didn't say that in a particular conversation.
Right.
It knows that from previous conversations.
Yep.
And so I also know that it's taking from a lot of internet and other accounts and things like that. So I'm logged in on an account, so it knows it has a history of my
Yep.
chats with it. But if let's throw a scenario out there. So let's say that I'm working on compensation and I'm in an Excel spreadsheet and I'm talking to ChatGPT about, hey, what's a good formula to be able to get this thing done? But maybe I'm putting in an example of some very private information around compensation.
Yes.
How protected is that?
Not at all.
Okay, that was what my thought.
Yeah, okay, so, asterisk,
Okay.
caveats. So, this is universally true of consumer technology. If you are not paying for the product, you are the product. If you're not paying for ChatGPT, you're paying for ChatGPT, just not with money. And what you're paying for it with is your data. So the way that these tools get so much better so fast is that the more that people interact with them, every prompt that you send to OpenAI, to Anthropic, to Google, to whatever the vendor is, they're receiving that, they're keeping it, it's theirs. They are going to use that to bake into the next generation of the model. And so technically, you have just released that information to the entire world. Now, we do have contracts. We do have the world of business, and we have law and order still, for a while. You'll notice up here on my screen, I've got this little blue diamond. That is indicative of the fact that I am using an account in ChatGPT that is part of an enterprise workspace. So you can go to openai.com and you can sign your company up for an enterprise agreement. And one of the stipulations in that enterprise agreement is that OpenAI will not share information that I put into the tool. OpenAI will not use the information I put into the tool to train its future models. And so that's where the asterisk comes in. The qualification is that I can enter into a business relationship with a generative AI vendor with provisions that say you will keep my information safe. Now, that said, that is a business protection. And so when we deal with risks in business, there are all kinds of ways we can mitigate those risks. There are all kinds of risks and all kinds of ways we can mitigate those risks. This is a business control, a contractual control. But it's only as good as the vendor's cybersecurity controls. It's only as good as the integrity of the humans who are back here with the keys. So it's not ironclad. And so what we do at the laboratory, we have grades of data confidentiality. And we have only approved the use of ChatGPT for low confidentiality data. And so we define that as, if the information gets out, it's not going to violate any laws. It's not going to cause harm to the laboratory or to the humans. It's not going to cause a great deal of reputational damage. It gets out in the wild. Maybe I didn't want it to, but it's fine. Nobody's getting fired. For what we call moderate confidentiality data, those are things where we have particular controls around the data. So controlled unclassified information, controlled nuclear information, international trade in arms regulations, ITAR information. So if there are regulations, personally identifiable information in your world, HIPAA protected or regulated data would be things that we would consider moderate data. And we do not currently use tools like this for that kind of data. Now I am working on it. So one of the things you can do, if you've got a robust IT department, one of the things that they can do is they can build for you an on-premise, an on-site version of this tool that is contained entirely within your company's IT infrastructure, so it's entirely within your walls, and you have the ability to put technical controls around it and say, there's no way that this information leaves without me knowing it. I can put it behind my firewall. I can protect the information more in my control. And so we're building that. We're going to have that ready by the end of March. That's from my boss, who told me that it's going to be done at the end of March. And once that is released, we will likely authorize that to be used at the moderate level of data security. So, yes, right out of the box, the free tools, just assume that you are talking to a newspaper reporter.
Question. So, okay, so you go into ChatGPT, like this joke here.
Yeah.
You said, sometimes there's a thumbs up, thumbs down, it's not appropriate. So obviously we're giving this feedback, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're also like, what is appropriate to me may not be appropriate to you.
True.
So I guess my bigger question is sometimes when I see our folks using this to answer a question or a place where they're stuck on maybe it's a technical piece.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just wondering about accuracy and reliability in a general sense.
Right.
Because I also know there are probably players out there that it's a wildly inappropriate joke, and they're like, that's totally fine.
Right.
To just be that person.
Yep.
So, how does that all play into this?
Got so many ways to go off of that question. So, no, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to hang on to that question because I'm going to try to answer a part of it and then I'm going to forget the rest of it. So I'm going to have to come back to you and then we'll come back and go down a different path. So let's start with, Paul, one of the questions you had was sort of how do I use it? I forgot your name. I'm so sorry. Yeah, Christy, you also asked how do we use this. So my general advice is going to be treat a generative AI tool like a smart intern from a foreign country. One of the interesting aspects of this, because it is a predictive text model, it will always return a response. It does not matter if it does not have the relevant information. It does not matter if it doesn't know. It will always return a response. And that is one of the big pitfalls when you're asking about reliability and accuracy. It is also one of the huge pitfalls when it comes to AI literacy. The problem that I've got personally right now is that when it starts giving me responses in areas that are outside my realm of personal knowledge and expertise, I don't know if it's God, we're being videotaped, I can't curse, if it's full of hot air. Y'all are going to have to help me with the euphemisms. When I'm talking to a human, you're listening to me, like you've got a sense of when I'm getting out over my skis and you're like, yeah, he's saying words, I don't believe them. I have no way, I've not developed any judgment like that for AI responses. There's no inflection, there's no body language, there's no visual indicator for me about, and yeah. So that's one of the things that's really difficult about judging the accuracy and the reliability. So I say treat it like a smart intern from a foreign country. A smart intern, they're ambitious. They've got a lot of academic knowledge. They've got a lot to draw from. They really want to please you. They are trying to impress you. They want that permanent job. You ask a question, they're going to give an answer. Now, because they have no experience to speak of, because they have no professional judgment to speak of, there is no telling whether that answer is going to be right, wrong, appropriate to the situation, whether it's going to have nuance. So consequently, one of the things I really encourage you to do is do not use generative AI as a final answer for anything. Use generative AI as a starting point. Do not use it as the ending point. There's this great, it is now an apocryphal story. I believe it is true, but I can't cite it. I could ask ChatGPT to cite it, but I wouldn't know if it was telling the truth. Attorney has a brief due to the court. Attorney turns to a generative AI tool. I won't say which one because I don't remember and I don't want to malign any particular one. I don't want to get sued. Uses a generative AI tool to generate that brief. Takes the brief, signs it, submits it to the court. Comes time for the hearing. The judge goes to the attorney. Come here. What is this? He goes, that's my brief, Your Honor. And are you in the habit of just completely fabricating references? No, Your Honor. Then why are all of the cases, all of the precedents in this brief completely fabricated so far as I can tell? I can't find a single one of these references in any of my reference materials. It's because the generative AI made it up. Generative AI made up references because it is not a lawyer. It is a text prediction engine. And the reason the attorney didn't catch it is because they sounded like real cases. It knows what cases sound like. You take some 3-syllable last name versus some corporation or government entity, and you've got yourself a case name. Snickerdoodles Incorporated versus Johnson Riley et al., 1972. Sounds like a real case, just made it up. So, smart intern might go and might be reading a thread on an internet forum that's like, in reality, it's like some long-running legal joke or something from the firm of Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe. And the intern doesn't know that. And so they grab that thinking that it's a real reference, and they insert that into the brief, and they hand it to you. And you say, yes, excellent. And you just send it right on. So no lawyer who enjoys continuing the practice of law would take an intern's brief and hand it directly to a judge without having looked at it and verified it and checked it.
So does AI, do these AI tools, they scour the internet, but they're a predictive, like what comes next. So it's basically like probability and statistics.
That's right.
It's not actually pulling data from the whole internet. It's just, what do I think sounds best next?
That is, in a nutshell. So like all models, that is a simplification of the truth. And so that is true at its core. And the early tools were just like that and nothing more. And since then, the companies have been enhancing them. One of the things we talk about in the AI world is grounding. Is the model grounded? A model would be grounded in a particular data set or data source. And so when I was talking about, you can build one of these tools on premise in your company within your boundaries. One of the things you can do as you do that is you can ground the model in your company's data. You can ground it in your HR policy manual. You can ground it in your ERP system. You can ground it in, your favorite HR salary survey. And so one of the other things you can do is you can ground it to the web. And when I say ground, I almost think of this like the electrical meaning of ground. Like it is a path that information can travel. So you ground it to the web, then it can work in certain instances like a search engine. It can take the prompt you gave and it'll do its prediction. It'll also sort of do the equivalent of a Google search and see what kind of information comes back. And it will take all of that and predict what is the best response to give you. So they've enhanced this basic predictive engine with some search engine-like functionality. Another thing that they've done, I don't know if you can see up here in the top left, it says ChatGPT 4.0. So OpenAI is the corporation behind this tool. ChatGPT is the name of the tool. 4.0 is the model. And so that would be like General Motors, Chevrolet, I don't know. Let's go with Toyota instead. Toyota Corolla LE. So this is like the trim level. And like the trim levels of cars have different engines and some different features. ChatGPT has different models, has different trim levels. So the 4.0 model is a really useful one. It's sort of general purpose. It's your Swiss Army knife of large language models. 0.1 and 0.1 Mini are a couple of OpenAI's newer models, and they have some reasoning functionality built in. And so, Stefan, you were asking about agents earlier. And so one of the things that these newer, more advanced models do, these reasoning models, is they take a concept, they predict a result, and then they separately attempt to analyze that result and see what kind of conclusions they can draw from the analysis of the result. And if the conclusion is that that is probably a bad result, it will circle back to the beginning of the problem. And so it makes it more fit for certain things. Sherry, were you talking about the history where it remembers? Yeah, so I was demonstrating this tool to someone. We've got an interesting problem I'm working on at work. All of you guys who are in any kind of manufacturing or any kind of retail business have inventory. You've got things on a shelf in a warehouse. Same for us. We've got things on a shelf in a warehouse. Our things on a shelf in a warehouse are hot, glowy rocks. Our inventory has a really, really irritating characteristic. Our inventory, in addition to the fact that it'll kill you, which not all of it will, just some of it, but that's not the irritating characteristic. I can deal with that. The irritating characteristic is what I put in the box will transform into other things while it is in the box. And so if I put, what did I say here? If I start with 3 grams of actinium-227, that's when I containerized that material and put it on the shelf in the warehouse. If I come back 17 days later and open that container up to do inventory and make sure I still have my 3 grams of actinium-227, I know for a fact I will not have 3 grams of actinium-227 because the stupid thing will have transformed into something else. And so I asked it, if I start with 3 grams of actinium-227, what products in what masses will be present 17 days from today? And I used the 0.1 reasoning model for this. And what it does is it has some information about physics, and all of this is just math. And it can do math okay. And so it actually writes a narrative about how to understand this problem, and then gives me an answer. So after 17 days, when I go to do my inventory check, I'm going to have 2.996 grams of actinium-227. 0.00438 grams of thorium-227 will have been created, and a trace amount of francium-223. What about 1 year later? So this feature of being able to go back to old prompts is called memory. And one of the interesting things is that in addition to just being able to pick up a chat where you left off, it also can, at your option, based on your configurations, remember certain things long term. So one of the things I do, one of my hobbies is building guitars and amplifiers and effect pedals. And so I've got all these transistors and resistors and capacitors and all these little electronic components. And so what I did was I told it to remember my inventory. I have 10 capacitors of this value and 10 resistors of this value. And so I told it, remember this. And then later, when I go and ask it a question like, what kind of distortion pedal could I make with the transistors that I have available to me right now? It remembers that inventory and factors that into the question. So it'll go searching the web for, what do I do if I have a 2N5184 transistor? Are there any circuits that incorporate that? So this was a demo that I did a couple of days ago, and I just asked it a question again, and it was able to pick up the context. So all I said was, what about 1 year later? If I had come in this morning and I had just walked up to you and I said, what about 1 year later? You turned and walked away because I'm crazy, man, and you're not real comfortable in the room anymore. It remembered the context of this particular chat, and so it knew I was talking about the actinium question, and so it has recalculated with the different variables. You saw about how long it took, so it's not instant, but then again, neither is a human. Like if I had to punch in a calculator, that would take me a minute. Nicholas?
Yeah, and I don't want to get ahead of your presentation, but perhaps you could talk a little bit about like context and how AIs generally get better the more context we provide to them. So to Christy's point, what jokes are appropriate, right, depends entirely on our setting, and the information you provide to the AI can help us, can help us get better responses.
So there's a couple of fun stories. One that I'll tell y'all because a lot of y'all are in AI. One of the early uses of artificial intelligence was attempting to sift through resumes. If you're lucky enough to post a job in, I don't know, your Facebook or something, you get 1,000 applicants, and it's just too much for any one recruiter to go through and do the sieve. That's a problem that's ripe for an AI solution. And so they had trained a model on past resumes and past hiring decisions. And they feed it resumes, and it says, yes, this is a good one, or no, this is not a good one. So they run this, and they begin to realize that something is fishy about the results that they're getting, and they can't quite put their finger on it until someone does put their finger on it. All the names were male names that it was given a thumbs up to. Why? Why did it do that?
That was the data they gave it.
That was the data they gave it. Be more specific. Bias. So think about the data that it was trained on, resumes and hiring decisions. If the humans that were making the hiring decisions were biased, and they were biased towards male applicants, then what the model learns is that all things being equal, a male name is more likely to be successful in this trial than a female name. The AI doesn't have any awareness, it doesn't have any morality, it doesn't have any soul. All it has is a mathematical model. And so if you put garbage in, you will get garbage out. So Nicholas, remind me what the question was.
About setting the context with something. So if
Yeah.
I, for example, say I am working in this profession
Right.
and run a mid-sized whatever company,
Yep.
the AI will know, right, and do
Right.
quotation marks, that some answers are more appropriate than others.
Yes. So the data on which the model is trained is part of that context. Another part of the context is your past interactions with it that it's allowed to remember. And so, for instance, if I asked it in my personal account, and I can't really show you my personal account because I'm on my work computer. If I asked it, what's a fun kind of distortion? Then what it would do is it would start naming distortion pedals for guitar. It wouldn't talk about other kinds of distortion like translucence in glass or noise in a subway. It would talk to me about guitar pedals because almost all of my past conversations with it have been in the context of guitars and amplifiers and effects. So the training data, the past conversations, and then the prompt itself can provide context. And so what you're leading us into is one of the things about how do we practically actively use these tools, there is an emerging field, discipline, knowledge base, I don't know what to call it, called prompt engineering. You guys in HR, let's see, raise your hand if you have ever conducted an interview. Okay, almost everyone. You have done prompt engineering, right? The prompts are the questions that you ask the candidates. And you are thinking ahead of time about how are you going to form and phrase these questions. And you're forming and phrasing these questions in a particular way because you want certain results. One of the things you want is to stay within the boundaries of the law. So you might get some advanced questions from the recruiting manager, and you see one of them is, tell me about your family. You say, let's talk about that. What are you trying to get at with that question? Because that can be kind of problematic. Well, I'm trying to understand if they've got experience dealing with personal commitments and if they are trustworthy and if they've got a solid foundation and I can trust them. Like, okay, those things might indeed be applicable to the job, but let's think about some different ways to ask different questions that could get us at that without straying into an area that might lead us into some bias, be it conscious or unconscious. So you're doing prompt engineering. Generative AI benefits from the same kind of prompt engineering. So a couple of tricks. One is you can set up what's called a persona. And so as you're prompting it, I'm going to create a new chat. I am who do I want to be?
Your first one's travel enthusiast, so why don't you be a travel agent?
Oh, okay. I'm a travel enthusiast. No, this is actually good. You know what? I didn't even see that down there. You know that part of the interview where you ask somebody, are you detail-oriented? I lie. But no, this is great. So one of the things to point out, many of these tools have some built-in help for you. They're trying to teach you how to use the tool. And so it's giving you some examples of how to engineer a prompt. So a common technique that we're using lately is I am a. And so you describe the persona that the AI is going to respond to. I'm a travel enthusiast who really enjoys the outdoors. I love mountains, but I also love oxygen, so I prefer low altitudes. I would like to see wildlife and have a mild adventure that doesn't put me in too much danger. I have reasonably good mobility, although my knees do hurt when going downhill sometimes. What would be a good place to go hiking this weekend? So I've told it some things about me. I haven't told it everything about me, but again, think about the smart intern from a foreign country. You give it some context. You tell it some information about the problem it's dealing with, and you're trying to sort of teach it. You're trying to develop it. You're trying to bring it along. By the way, the from a foreign country part is because one of the things that these tools currently don't have a lot of is a lot of cultural awareness. And so just as someone from a foreign country may not have, they're not ignorant of American societal norms or Southern societal norms, but they're not just immersed in them. And so a lot of the nuance may be lost on them, and they may make some faux pas. Same thing here. So, low altitude hikes, wildlife observation, and mild adventures near Atlanta. Here are some suitable trails. Did I say anything about Atlanta?
No, you can say the other dog either.
Did,
Leash dogs are welcome.
oh, leash dogs are welcome. Well, it's just interesting. So interestingly, it may be making an inference.
Web link.
I ask all the time for links, and it always says I can't
Oh.
get links. So
Yeah,
that's-
so-
do that.
Okay, so a few things here. Number one, I'm not from Atlanta. I'm not currently in Atlanta. I'm not moving to Atlanta. God bless any of you who are from Atlanta, but it is not the city for me. But I think what has happened is that ORNL cyber defenses have a little trick where they will make me look like I am from places that I'm not. And so it's trying to be sneaky. It's looking at the HTTP request header, and it's trying to geolocate me. And so it's trying to add context that I didn't give it through human language, but that I gave it through technical means. I didn't even know I was giving it through technical means. But again, going back to the reliability and accuracy question. The thing about the dogs, like that part of the response could be a couple of things going on. One, it could be making an inference that people who talk about liking to observe wildlife like to enjoy animals or dogs or whatever. So that may just be pure prediction, and it's adding that. The other thing that may be happening is I think about the training data that it comes from. When I think about, like, if I go to the Tennessee State Parks website, one of the things that's often in the information about the different areas, the different hikes, is are horses allowed on the trail? Are dogs allowed on the trail? Are there picnic or camping facilities nearby? And so it always sees that kind of information in close proximity to information about the hike. And so it predicts that that is a thing that humans want to see and want to hear about. The other thing that y'all keyed on was this link. 10 bucket list hikes near Atlanta. So it gave me a link, and one of you were saying, it tells me, you're saying, it doesn't give me links.
I often ask for links. So
Yeah, give me a link.
Tech stuff, but it's always like, no links available. So I just thought it was easy with that.
More practical tips. Oh no, here, go there. Y'all leave me alone. So,
And why that one? Like, what would make, why that one link?
why that one link? Yeah. Because it's a smart intern from a foreign country. One of the things that's available in ChatGPT in particular, and I'm sorry, I'm only showing you one tool. There are other tools. Anthropic has a tool called Claude.
Speaking of other tools, how does DeepSeek, is it any different than?
Hang on to that question. I promise you I will come back to it when it's scary story time. So one of the features of ChatGPT, and most of the tools have something like this, is some preferences, some customizability. And so you can do things like, you can tell it what to address you as. What do you do? So what you're doing is you are building context for all the future prompts and responses. So what traits should ChatGPT have? So I've told it ChatGPT should always indicate the level of certainty on an answer. ChatGPT should always provide links to sources used in generating an answer. So I'm trying so hard to get this thing to give me some sense of certainty. This is my latest attempt to deal with that AI literacy blind spot I was talking about, that when it answers things that I don't know the answer to personally, how do I know if it's bluffing or not?
Okay,
And
did you tell it specifically what sources to use?
Yes, you can. So anyway, I can give it this kind of context, and you should set up these personalizations. I give it this context. I work at the Department of Energy National Laboratory, yada, yada, yada.
Do they all have those?
I don't know. ChatGPT and Copilot are the two that I'm really familiar with. Up here in this top right, there's a little thing that says Customize ChatGPT. There's also settings.
Not the free.
So I am in an enterprise version. I happen to know that in the free version, there is this same customized ChatGPT. So when you go, it may be when you go to your settings or go to account, you have the opportunity to give it that kind of prompt.
Jay, will you open that back up? I'm going to copy what you wrote when I get back to work. Thank you.
Can we get it to use a particular source? Let me know when you're done. What I'm going to do next is a use case that we were playing around with one of our chemists at the laboratory. Had a situation, a laboratory technician is going to this chemical pantry cabinet, opening it up, getting the stuff. She's getting headaches. Virtually every time she goes to open up this cabinet, getting headaches. And that is a safety concern that we cannot abide. So we've got to figure out what is it in that cabinet that is potentially causing this person's headaches. Now we have ways to do that without AI. What we'll do is we'll go to a government source called PubChem, and PubChem has a standardized catalog of hazards for virtually every chemical compound that you can think of. And in addition to the hazards, it'll talk about, what are some of the symptoms that would be indicative of that hazard having manifested itself. And so we'll get a chemical safety expert to think, like a physician, you go in and you tell them what your symptoms are. Well, it's probably this. Let me go look something up real quick. Let me try a couple of tests to narrow it down and see if I get it. A chemical safety expert would go to PubChem and say, I know it's probably something that, is in the alcohol family or something. I don't know. I'm not a chemist. And we'd start a search there and we'd start looking and we'd look at the inventory of chemicals in the cabinet and start trying to sort out what could it possibly be, and then having some candidates would investigate a little further. So what we did, you good? I have a chemical cabinet that contains thorazine, bromine, mercury, or some other chemicals, ethanol. What's a really nasty chemical? I should have brought it. Hydrochloric acid and other chemicals. My technician is getting headaches when she opens that cabinet, using PubChem only as a source of hazard information. Identify the likely hazards caused by each of the chemicals I've listed and the likelihood that exposure to that chemical would cause headaches. So now when we get to something like this, a safety-related thing, number one, what did I say earlier? We do not use generative AI as a final answer. We use generative AI as a starting point. So this is potentially a tool to help me save on some of the early sifting and some of the grunt work, some of the filing and collating, and give me a target to go investigate and verify. Two, I'm still not going to use this for an actual safety scenario. What I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to use this to prove out that this kind of use case can or can't work. And then I'm going to have my IT department build me a solution on premise. One of the reasons is because when I build the solution on premise, I can choose what sources it is grounded to, and I can actually tell it, PubChem, that's it. I do not want you to go to anything else. I don't want you to go to the manufacturer's website. I don't want you to go to Reddit, God help us. I want you to use this. Reddit MD. We're all going to die. That's the answer. Okay. So you can tell that I was watching NCIS last night because I have the Thorazine antipsychotic medication. Headaches are a reported side effect. Bromine, reddish brown liquid, strong odor, it's corrosive. Inhalation can lead to respiratory irritation and headaches. Mercury, heavy silver metal. Chronic exposure can lead to neurological symptoms, including headache. That's actually an interesting, helpful bit of information that the situation I'm describing is not chronic exposure, it is acute exposure, it's temporary episodic. And so that's actually a helpful little bit of information for me. It's also indicative of the smart intern scenario. Smart intern wasn't thinking about the difference between chronic and episodic exposure. Ethanol, inhalation of vapors, hydrochloric acid. So, given the chemicals present in your cabinet, it's plausible that exposure to vapors from bromine could be contributing to your technician's headaches. The vapors is also a helpful little hint here. It's telling me what is the mode of exposure that is likely causing a thing. And that also gives me a hint about where I might start looking for mitigation factors. You know,
Is it open?
right, is it open? Could I put a ventilation hood above this cabinet that turns on automatically when I open the doors to direct the vapors away from the human technician? Ensuring proper ventilation, appropriate PPE, and minimizing exposure. So it's giving me some ideas. Do you imagine for a second that I'm about to go to the director of environmental safety, health, and quality at Oak Ridge National Laboratory and tell him I have got the answer for you? Because I like money, and I get money from my job, and I get to go to my job because I don't get fired because I don't do stupid things like take a generative AI answer to the director of environmental safety, health, and quality at Oak Ridge National Laboratory. I can use this as a starting point as a chemical safety expert and say, you know, this has saved me some time. This has prompted some creativity for me. And so it's given me a direction to go. Now, sources. I told it use PubChem and only PubChem. And so it gave me a link to the PubChem entry for Thorazine. By the way, note that Thorazine is a trade name, I guess, for a generic compound called chlorpromazine. So it's interesting that it was able to make that semantic connection. And that's one of the really powerful things about this tool is the ability to make semantic connections. When you search for job, it can also search for position because you could train it that idiot hiring managers, for all you tell them, cannot figure out the difference between a job and a position. It's not that freaking hard, but they can't figure it out. And so when you hear job from a hiring manager, assume they mean position. Those kinds of semantic connections are so powerful. And so it has given me a source directly to the source that I asked it to give it to me.
Hey, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
If we wanted to, if you go back to your chat GPT and you wanted to take that information and put it into a PowerPoint presentation, can it start that for you?
I have no idea. Let's see.
I know it can dump to itself. I'm not sure about
I have no idea what it's going to do right now. We're coming towards the end of our time, and so I do want to tell some scary stories because I promised some scary stories, and I promised to talk about not deep fake. God, I keep getting that wrong. DeepSeek. DeepSeek. DeepSeek is a AI model and also an AI research company that has been in the news a lot the past couple of weeks. They are a Chinese research company that claims to have produced a large language model roughly equivalent in power to ChatGPT's OpenAI O1 model, and to have done so with dramatically less computing resources. One of the sustainability issues about AI where we are right now is that the electricity required to generate one of these trained models is insane. I was talking about Frontier, second most powerful computer on the planet that we know of. We could only train a ChatGPT model about 6 times in a year if we just ran the thing full throttle. I created a PowerPoint presentation. This could be fun. So, another practical tip. If you're wondering, can it do X? Hell, I don't know, give it a try.
Jay, you want to hear some irony?
Yeah.
ChatGPT, you can export to Excel.
Uh-huh.
You can't in Copilot chat.
Copilot, by the way, is Microsoft's generative AI tool. And you know, it's a virtue of the fact that Microsoft has to start somewhere, and they've just chosen that's not the more important feature right now. They'll get to it. They really will. To wit, if I had tried this and it didn't work, this is the first time I've tried it, it actually worked, I'm amazed. But I'm not surprised that I'm amazed. And it's because these things are changing so fast. You guys know the concept of dog years, right? AI years. An AI year is 3 months in human time. So if you haven't tried something this week, and you tried something last week and it didn't work, if you haven't tried it this week, try it again and see what happens.
But that's what I was going to say. I asked for a PowerPoint presentation maybe 2 months ago, and it said, I can't really do a PowerPoint presentation file, but here's a template of all the slides.
Right.
So I was surprised that it would actually provide you a file.
Yep.
Which means in a few months you'll be able to say, I want to be able to say things like, here's the color, here's my colors, the color tones that I want you to use, and
Yep.
it will make it colored.
Yep. So anyway, DeepSeek is a Chinese large language model. It's got a number of things that are unique about it. Its energy efficiency and training was the most notable thing. A couple of things. We don't have any way to independently verify the claims that DeepSeek makes about its development and its training. While it is the software, there's a version of it that is open source, but it will take a great deal of time to go through that source code to analyze it and determine that there are not security risks within it, either intentionally placed. It could be the Chinese Trojan horse, and they want everybody to install it and adapt it, or just plain old human stupidity. Humans make bad choices, and humans make bad choices all the time that lead to cybersecurity problems. So as you're choosing what models, what products to use, think about the supply chain. Who is the vendor? What do you know about them? Where are they based? What regulations do they fall within? What power do you have over them? What power do they have over you? No sooner would you go buy just any old random human capital management system, should you go buy just any old random generative AI tool. Evaluate these products with a eye towards the risk versus value. So scary story time. We talked about the data that it's trained on being one part of the context. One of the attacks against artificial intelligence and the reason that you care about the supply chain is that tiny perturbations in the training data can result in dramatic differences in the conclusions and the output that it produces. And so there have been researchers who've shown how by putting just the right sticker in just the right place on a stop sign, it can convince Tesla that the stop sign is a 45-mile-an-hour sign. Because, again, the computer vision doesn't see a stop sign. It sees a pattern of electromagnetic radiation, and it interprets that in a certain way. And so changes to that can cause the model to come to different conclusions that a human would never come to. So that's one risk. Another thing is that the training data itself can in some cases be extracted from the model after the fact. So because it's a predictive sort of thing, imagine that your model had been trained by all of the emails in your company, and that your company had not been smart about encryption with personally identifiable information. And there's a flurry of emails in there about, spreadsheets of employees and social security numbers. And so you could, if the model had been trained on that, this doesn't really work anymore because but there are attacks like this. You could type in a prompt, Sherry's social security number is 4, and hit enter. And it will see that and it will predict what should come next, because that's what it does. And if it's been trained on some data that says Sherry, social security number 123, then it might predict the right thing. And I said 4 to give it a first number to narrow down, to give it a little nudge in that right direction. And then there are other ways to determine how likely is it that that particular answer is indeed true. And so you can extract. There was one scary version of this where a researcher extracted sort of low resolution images of faces from a facial recognition system. So it put in the name and got a picture instead of giving it a picture and getting a name. So the training, also in the supply chain risks, God, we had a thing, the entire world had a thing. There is a very well-known, very widely used training data set called Lion. I told you earlier, I was using numbers that don't mean anything to the human mind. 70 billion parameters. Billion, with a B. It's too big a number for you to comprehend in any meaningful way. Which is the reason that nobody immediately figured out that that training set had highly objectionable, illegal, and harmful photographs in it. The kind that brings the FBI to your office. And so it turned out that almost every large language model for a while had been trained on these corrosive images. Not immediately obvious what impact that had on the model itself, but those models got scrapped. Pull the train down. And so, again, if you're a manufacturing company and say you're making plastic products and you're sourcing the plastic resin, you want to know about the supply chain. Same thing here. So there are a number of attacks, and so to that end, what I'm begging you on behalf of your IT and your cybersecurity folks are, don't rush headlong into this. I know it is tempting to look at this and say, this is the next generation, we have to have this, our competitors have this, we have to have it or we're going to fall behind. Make smart decisions, and if those smart decisions require time and thought and analysis, take that time and thought and analysis. I'm not saying you will necessarily regret moving fast, but know that there is a significant risk to doing so. And that's, DeepSeek came out a week ago. Like, I just can't tell you anything intelligent about it. I know what they say about it, and that's it. One of our researchers asked, can we put it on Frontier, test it out? Have you lost your friggin' mind? But maybe what we can do is we can stand up a computer that we're okay with burning to the ground after the fact. and install it on that and let you work it out. And as we figure out whether it's safe or not, then, if we discover that it's not safe, well, then we'll just toss the thing in a shredder if we have to, and call it the cost of doing business. That's not likely to happen, and we've got all kinds of ways we can sanitize, but you've got to make smart decisions about your risk tolerance, and make good choices. I feel like we haven't talked about nearly enough things. I feel like, the woman there had a question that I wanted to come back to 4 more times because there are 4 different paths that we could have gone down and we never got a chance to go back. We only went down one of those paths. So that said, you've got me for like 7 more minutes. What's on your mind right now as we wrap this up? Stefan.
I'd love to get your kind of thought quote on, we've been recommending to our clients, hey, Copilot, arguably, yes, it's a paid product, but it is the most secure in that data is already in 365. We're already establishing MFA to get into it.
Yep.
We have conditional access policies to access that data.
Yep.
So if you're going to feed a generative AI any type of, you mentioned confidence levels in data, levels of data security, you're going to feed it anything, even at low confidence, we're okay with this getting. It should be Copilot, it should not be ChatGPT. What are your thoughts on it from a cybersecurity standpoint?
I don't disagree, is what I'll say. I'm not saying that it's a wrong decision to use ChatGPT. I'm saying that you've got to make that decision for yourself based on your risk tolerance, the features that ChatGPT has that Copilot doesn't. But again, so a couple of things about Copilot. One, it is grounded in your M365 environment, and so it can see your files and all that stuff, and that makes it incredibly powerful. Also, it is contained entirely within your M365 tenant. And so to the degree that you trust Microsoft to keep your stuff in your bubble, you've got that going for you. And so those are good things. Interestingly, Copilot introduces a whole new kind of security risk. If you're at a corporation that has a really large SharePoint infrastructure, you've got tons of SharePoint sites. I'm here to tell you the odds that all of your SharePoint sites have their security correctly configured is de minimis. It is almost zero. It is a vanishingly small likelihood that your SharePoint site security is correctly configured. And so when you bring in something like Copilot that has access grounding to the entire M365 environment, what you are more likely than not to find is that people start seeing documents and content that they should not see. Not because Copilot did anything wrong, not because SharePoint did anything wrong, but because one of your humans, the SharePoint site owner, didn't configure the security correctly. And so it starts exposing privacy defects within your existing infrastructure. Now, that can be a great thing, right? Like, use the right way. So what we're doing at ORNL is we are doing a small pilot of Copilot just within a small group inside IT Services Directorate. And we're using it and we're looking to see if we can kick the tires and cause anything to shake out that shouldn't be there. We also have gotten an automated scanning tool that will go through and use rules to determine what are some potential privacy defects. We have some automated tools so that once they find a privacy defect, can correct it or can notify a human. And so we're doing this long burn-in period for Copilot with a small trusted group in the lab where the damage can be contained if there is any damage before we send it out to the entire lab at large. By the way, Copilot, expensive as heck. Another reason we're starting small, because if it's not everything that it's being hyped to be, it's not going to be worth it, just monetarily. Value matters.
One thing I think about with a lot of this is I can use it for what I think of as like fluffy things. Like help me write a notice to our staff to let them know about it.
Yes.
But that's also something that if I spent 10 minutes, I could do it.
You could.
Yeah. I feel like there's a missing step. Like I can imagine these really, really big, helpful, value-added things, and I don't know what to do to get to that place.
And all I can, yes, everybody is indeed there. One of the things I love most for it is when I find myself staring at a blank screen and I've got writer's block. I've got this enormous task in front of me and I just don't know where to start. Then sometimes what I'll do is I'll give ChatGPT the prompt that my boss gave me, just to see what it says. And that's like, oh, that's actually a great idea to talk about the database integrations that this thing's got to consider. And it sparks thought. Some programmers have this problem-solving technique called the rubber ducky method. And the idea is that you have a rubber ducky sitting on your desk. And when I say rubber ducky, I'm not being metaphorical. I mean like literally a little yellow bath toy. Sitting on your desk, and you explain to the rubber ducky, out loud, mind you, what your problem is. And some of you may have experienced this. When you start explaining your problem or asking your question to another human, the answer comes to you like that. And it is because there is a physical portion of your brain that processes speech that is distinct and separate from the part of your brain that processes conceptual, the voice inside your head. And so the act of speaking engages a different part of your brain and causes that answer to emerge from that other part. ChatGPT is a wonderful yellow duck because not only can I talk to it, it'll talk back to me. Give me some ideas. So use it as a starting place. Use it as a place to get you off the blocks. Use it as an accelerator. I was writing an email to my division just the other day about use or lose vacation. And the message I'm trying to get out is, please, dear God, think now about your vacation because I can't have 80% of you leaving on June 29th. I cannot operate this way. That tone's not quite right. So I asked ChatGPT, take this message and make it a little more friendly or a little more, and so I use it to shape the tone. And so things like that, it's an accelerator, it's a helper, it's a starting point, it's a creative tool. And a lot of the drudgery, like, can you get me started with some PowerPoint slides? Save some time. So right now, I am finding in my particular role, it saves me 10 minutes at a time. But if I do that, 6 times a day, I've got an hour that I didn't have before. Oh my God, that is amazing. So I'm so sorry, we are out of time. I believe that you guys probably have my contact info through the partnership. If you don't, Paul knows how to get in touch with me, and so please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to come and speak with your organizations again. We're so grateful for the community's impact on Oak Ridge National Laboratory. Let us come be a part of what you're doing and help you out. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great.